Hey Ocean City Church family, it is Good Friday, and hopefully you've been traveling with us throughout Holy Week. We've been, starting on Wednesday, we've had this trajectory, and we've had these materials that you could grab online and kind of walk through with your family or on your own what's going on this week. And it's a time for us really to reflect and remember what Christ has done for us as we lead into Good Friday and ultimately into Resurrection Sunday. And it is the 6 p.m. hour on Friday, which right now between 3 and 6 p.m. we know that Christ gave his life away. And what communion is communion's a representation of exactly what that purchased for us. And it has a few different meanings, and we wanted to talk a little bit today about what it means, and then we want to give you an opportunity as a family or as an individual with friends to do communion. And it's a way that us as a church can kind of unify together in the 6 p.m. hour and do communion together. So Christ, the night before he gave his life away, really installed communion or instituted communion with the disciples. And he took the bread and said, "This is my body broken for you." He said in the same way, he took the cup, "This is my blood poured out for you." A new covenant. The system was gone and a Savior had come. And this Savior was a servant that gave his life away, poured out his blood. And communion really has several meanings for us and several things for us to remember. One is simply his death, to remember his death. Secondly, our commitment to understanding what was purchased for us individually in his death. And thirdly, in looking at the blood that he poured out, that it's the unifying factor of the church, that as Christ followers, it's the thing that rewrites our DNA as individuals and makes us brother and sister inside the church. It's this beautiful thing that we do together. And we were thinking about this whole idea of remembering, because that's really the heart of this weekend, what we have an opportunity to do.
Yeah, I was thinking specifically, why is communion, why is remembering so important? And recently, Derek and I had the privilege, a privilege of meeting with a counselor who, talk about life. Life's
You gotta
hard
get your oil checked sometimes.
Yeah.
You gotta check in. 25 years of marriage. You gotta.
Kid went off to college, working
sad.
together. Okay. Anyway, so we met with this counselor. He was amazing. And the second time we met with him, he said, "Hey, I want to hear the Derek and Beth story. If you guys want to talk about something else today, that's okay. We can pause on that, and I can hear it later." And Derek said, "Well, why don't we tell our story really quick and then talk about the things we want to talk about?"
He was having none of that.
And he was like, "No, I want to spend our whole time together hearing the details of the Derek and Beth story,
right,
and how you guys met and all of that." And that's a long one, because we met when we were how old?
12.
6th grade.
Yeah.
So anyway, we decided to do it, and we shared our story, and by the end of the hour, I was crying. I was like, I like this guy. I forget sometimes, life makes you forget that you like your person.
Yeah.
And it was so good to remember all those details in the story, and it just hit me when we said, "Man, Good Friday, we're gonna have communion." That's what it's about. It's about remembering. And in this timeline this week, it's been about, let's go back and think about it. Let's meditate on it. Let's talk about it to each other, what Jesus did, our first love. And I love that thought of just how important it is to remember.
Yeah, communion is one of those things, sometimes it's misunderstood in the church, that is one of the main things that we come together and we do communion, that he reminds us of just the beauty of what he's done, but also the ultimate sacrifice. It's something that really, when you have worship songs that are written and structured around communion, there's a reason that evokes tears, because you remember that somebody loved you that much to pour out their blood for you. Not just pour out their blood, but to walk through one of the most horrific deaths, if not the most horrific death in all of history. So as you do communion, and as you're thinking about communion and serving it to one another, a couple of things that you need to think about. One, communion isn't for everyone. I always say it's exclusively inclusive, that it's an opportunity if you are a new believer to engage in communion, but it is for the Jesus followers. So as a family, if you've got young ones that have not made a public profession of faith, so if you've got a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, communion is something that they wouldn't partake in. But if you've got ones that are older that have made bold proclamations of their faith, and it said, you know, I want to follow Jesus. I want to give my life to Jesus. I understand my sin. I understand what it cost, and I understand what needed to happen to buy me back. If your child understands that, then they can participate in communion. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul makes these, gives these really clear instructions. He explains what communion is. He explains what was happening when Jesus installed communion. And then he says, hey, if you've got bitterness towards somebody in your family or towards a brother and sister in the church, then you need to go to them before communion. Don't take communion with bitterness in your heart towards someone else. Step into it with a clear conscience. And the other thing is that it is for the believer. But it's an opportunity for us today at the 6 p.m. hour to really focus and think about the idea that Jesus, when he said it is finished, that it was finished, that it was done completely.
And I would just add, if you have little ones and they're not ready to take communion, them seeing you do this with each other is a beautiful thing. Whitney talked to us about discipling our families and how presence is so important. Them seeing us worshiping, taking communion, studying the Bible, and that is going to resonate with these kids in the future.
Yeah, it's one of the cool opportunities in the craziness of where we are in the world today. It's one of these unique opportunities where we are quarantined to a household where our kids can see things modeled in and through us, watch us make mistakes, but also watch us lean into who Jesus is and who God is. So have an amazing Good Friday. We love you. We so miss you. We miss the church. We miss gathering together. But take advantage of this time. We love you, Ocean City Church.
Love you guys.
We will see you soon.